Marco Sturm and the Boston Bruins are going outdoors this season, but I highly doubt it will match the impact that his game as a player had on the black and gold.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, August 5th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today on the podcast, we are discussing Bruins outdoor game appearances because it was announced this morning that a new logo had been released for the upcoming Stadium Series this season against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we're going to rank every Bruins game from Lake Tahoe to Fenway and maybe make a prediction as to where this game will fall into things. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been hosting this podcast since 2019 and been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years now. Marco Sturm, we all remember, scored the overtime winner at the 2010 Winter Classic. He also dropped the gloves that day. Now, he's head coach of the Boston Bruins, and today, like I said, we're going to rank every outdoor game the Bees have played, from blowout losses to iconic walk-offs, tracing the story how the Bruins became an outdoor hockey powerhouse. Now, first, let's just go through what actually counts here. Only official NHL regular season games are going to be ranked. That's the 2010 Winter Classic, 2016 Winter Classic, 2019 Winter Classic, the 2021 NHL Outdoors game, and then the 2023 Winter Classic. The Bruins do have a record of 4-1 in those games, and the Bruins will make their Stadium Series debut in 2026 versus the Tampa Bay Lightning at Raymond James Stadium. For those of you watching on YouTube, I popped up the logo that was released today in conjunction with this game. And again, the Bruins, Lightning, February 1st, 2026, first time in league history that an outdoor game will be played in a football stadium in the state of Florida. And it's the culmination of a month-long celebration of hockey in the Sunshine State. It will mark the second of two outdoor games hosted by Florida teams. The Florida Panthers will host the New York Rangers at Lone Depot Park, home of the Miami Marlins, on January 2nd. And these two games are intended to celebrate the explosive growth in hockey in Florida over the past 3 decades. The Panthers and Lightning have enjoyed significant success, including most recently with each of the last 6 Stanley Cup Final Series, featuring one of the Florida teams. So this is the first time the Bruins will be playing in a Stadium Series event. And what I just learned today was that their first outdoor game was not even a part of the NHL regular season at all. We're given an honorable mention here to the 1956 exhibition in Bay Roberts, Newfoundland. It's an unofficial exhibition versus the Conception Bay North Hockey League teams. The first NHL outdoor game in Canada. It was held on artificial outdoor ice at an unfinished arena. The Bruins rotated players with locals, finished with a full-on free-for-all, and local player Gerard Saunders ended up scoring on Terry Sawchuk. Wasn't an official NHL game, but what it was a glimpse of outdoor hockey's future. And it's kind of reminiscent of the Lake Tahoe game in that it was played in a foreign area to what we now consider to be NHL, arenas or NHL markets at the very least. And this one was really different because it, of course, was played against local hockey players, kind of like think of Mystery Alaska, kind of that sort of vibe. For the purpose of this ranking, it will be acknowledged, but we're not putting it in the actual outdoor game kind of phenomenon. Really interesting thing to learn about today, at the very least. I did not realize that the Bruins played outdoors in Newfoundland. And speaking of that, Mike Camito has a Bruins 365 game coming out, our book coming out, I should say, and we will be having him on the podcast sometime this month. We'll see if that makes it into the book. I would be shocked if it did not. It was historic. Only the second hockey match played outdoors that featured an NHL team. The first, you'll never guess this, was a 1954 Detroit Red Wings game at a prison in Michigan. This one was the first outdoor game in Canada featuring an NHL team, the first to be open to public, and the next outdoor game held in Canada with NHL participation would not be until 2003, the Heritage Classic in Edmonton. So just kind of crazy. I did not realize that had taken place at all. Not an official NHL game, but pretty cool to learn about, and would love to have seen some highlights from that as well. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it all, ranking the Bruins 5 outdoor games to date, from the Winter Classic to Lake Tahoe and everything in between. Let's break it down here as the podcast continues. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt a bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. We looked at our finances recently and saw how much we were spending on fast food for the boys, streaming services. We were able to rein it in with the help of Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thanks again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Today, we are ranking the Bruins outdoor games from number 5 to number 1, the good, the bad, the scenic. And we're going to have to start in 2016. January 1st, 2016, to be exact. Gillette Stadium, Foxborough, Mass. Supposed to be a marquee event, but turned out to be a very forgettable day for the Black and Gold. In fact, it was Boston's only outdoor loss to date. They entered the game with momentum. This was a matchup against their most historic rival, the Montreal Canadiens, and the vibes going into this game were pretty high. Adam McQuaid scored Boston's lone goal in the second period, but Montreal got a big boost from Brendan Gallagher, who was returning from injury, registered a goal and an assist, and Massachusetts native Mike Condon stopped 27 of 28 shots for the Habs to send a crowd of 67,246 people, which was the second largest of any Bruins outdoor game, sent them home pretty disappointed. It was also a record low for the Winter Classic at the time in terms of viewership. Just 2.78 million watched. Maybe that was a function of having a Canadian team featured in the Winter Classic. The Bruins outside of New England obviously have a following, but maybe not that national presence. But at the same time, the Winter Classic is generally seen more as a kind of gate-driven event. Yes, it's televised nationally for everyone to see, but the real vibe comes from being at the or the football stadium, the baseball stadium, wherever it is, and the viewership doesn't really capture the spirit of the event. The Bruins that day wore beautiful tribute jerseys modeled after the 1924-25 brown and gold uniforms. Weather was pretty solid that day, about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The ice conditions were excellent and fast, according to post-game reports. That just fueled the Montreal Canadiens, though. The Bruins looked completely unmatched, outshot, outworked. I remember watching this game from Ottawa, visiting my parents for the holidays. I was kind of distracted, trying to wrangle in the boys, but didn't really miss much. No real pushback from the Bruins, no clutch moments, no spark. And the most memorable part of the festivities, arguably the alumni game the day before, which brought back legends from both sides. Should have been an instant classic. Bruins, Canadiens, Winter Classic, en masse, outdoor dream scenario, but the Bruins did not show up. And the lopsided loss paired with record low viewership makes this the Bruins' weakest outdoor showing to date. As Claude Julien said after the game, it was a big stage, and the Bruins just did not meet the moment. Let's wash away that bad taste and head to one of the most beautiful outdoor settings hockey has ever seen, and that would have been Lake Tahoe, February 21st, 2021, Edgewood Tahoe Resort in State Line, Nevada, against the Philadelphia Flyers. And this one was a 7-3 win for the Bruins. Visually, like the best looking hockey game ever played. But in terms of atmosphere and buzz, something was missing, right? And we all know what it was. I'll never forget, I think it was after Charlie McAvoy scored, there was this wide shot of him raising his arms. One of the most beautiful hockey images I've ever seen. But there, of course, were no fans in attendance due to COVID-19 restrictions. And they were robbed of watching the Bruins light up the Flyers. David Pastrnak had a hat trick. It was Trent Frederick's first career NHL goal. Charlie McAvoy added a goal and an assist. And the setup was so unique. The rink was constructed on the 18th fairway of a golf course, framed by Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains. The locker rooms were built to look like rustic wood cabins, and we all remember the Bruins entering the game wearing throwback 90s neon ski jackets. Pasta even said, "I feel like I'm in a music video." He came out for the post-game interview and was dying to get back to Barbie Girl in the locker room. No fans, so the energy was a bit dimmed in this one. This is maybe the only reason why it ranks so low here. Goals went in with some stick taps, distant cheers, kind of a eerie environment because of all that was happening in the world at the time. And the event came one day after a pretty disastrous Avalanche Golden Knights game, which was delayed 8 hours due to melting ice and direct sunlight. The Bruins game was shifted to later in the evening to avoid similar issues. For me, though, watching on TV, it was surreal, dreamy, totally unlike any other game the Bruins have played. But without fans, limited national buzz, didn't really carry the emotional weight of other games. And also considering it was played against the Flyers, not, one of the Bruins' biggest rivals. So beautiful, yes. Memorable, yeah. Impactful, not really. From a postcard to a powerhouse crowd, let's take it to South Bend, where the Bruins played their only outdoor game as the away team. And that was in 2019. Winter Classic against the Chicago Blackhawks at Notre Dame Stadium. A 4-2 win for the Boston Bruins. And this one kind of had everything. Goals, comeback energy, massive crowd, and a record-breaking day for a Bruins legend. The Bruins trailed 2-1 midway through the second period. David Pastrnak had scored on the power play. Patrice Bergeron tied it, cashing in on a lucky bounce off Brent Seabrook's skate. Sean Kuraly, who's now back with the Bruins, scored the game winner, and Brad Marchand sealed it with an empty netter. Tuukka Rask made 36 saves in what was his 469th game with the Bruins, the most by a goalie in franchise history. Over 76,000 fans in attendance, largest for any Bruins outdoor game. The pregame show featured Weezer, probably my oldest favorite band. The South Bend Symphony was there. Notre Dame football legends were also in attendance for ceremonial puck drop. 2.97 million viewed the game, 20% increase over the previous year. The Bruins wore 1930s inspired brown and gold sweaters, keeping with the throwback vibe of the venue. Only thing that was missing was Rudy. Great game, great crowd, solid entertainment value. Didn't hit the emotional resonance, I should say, of the Fenway Park Classics. Bruins were the road team. Maybe had more fans than the Blackhawks, though. Changed the vibe slightly. Textbook outdoor win for the Bruins. Comeback, goalie milestone, a crowd that felt like a playoff game. But in the end, it just could not beat the vibes from Fenway. That's our bottom three. Now it's time to get to the truly iconic moments. Both of our top two games took place at Fenway Park. One was the origin story. The other was high drama. Comeback with record-breaking viewership. Let's decide which Fenway game is number one here as the podcast continues. All right, let's break down the other two outdoor games for the Boston Bruins and see which ranks number one. Number two, we're going with the most recent Winter Classic, which is January 2nd, 2023, against the Pittsburgh Penguins. This one had it all: drama, design, nostalgia, and ratings. The Bruins didn't just return to Fenway, they reminded everyone why this ballpark is the crown jewel of outdoor hockey. Now, the Bruins trailed 1-0 entering the third period. Jake DeBrusk scored both goals in the final frame, one at 7:46, the other at 17:36, and he played through a fractured fibula suffered earlier in the game, a fact revealed after he missed the next 17 contests. Linus Ullmark made 27 saves, continuing his Vezina-worthy campaign. And we learned later that after two pretty sluggish periods, Nick Foligno gave an impassioned speech in the locker room saying he wanted to remind the boys of who they are, what kind of team they've been all year. And they responded with one of their gutsiest periods of the season. Fortunately, they weren't able to replicate that in the playoffs against the Florida Panthers. That's a story for another day. 39,243 people decked in black and gold. The vibe was electric. The Bruins leaned heavily into the baseball crossover. Red Sox theme uniforms. Manual Fenway scoreboard was updated with NHL Atlantic standings. And Sweet Caroline, Take Me Out to the Ball Game were played between periods. Jim Montgomery was coaching in his first outdoor game, said, "This is why you coach in Boston." 1.8 million average viewers, peaking at 2.1 million. The most watched NHL regular season game on TNT, which even outdrew some NBA broadcasts that week. Strong bounce back for Winter Classic viewership after a few declining years. Had all the ingredients. Legendary venue, rivalry matchup, comeback win, massive ratings. You could argue the Penguins aren't a true rival, but they did have some conference final appearances along the way, some playoff rounds between Bergeron, Crosby. What holds it back from being number one, though? Stakes weren't quite as high. Wasn't the first, and as dramatic as the Brusques' goals were, it didn't go to overtime or feature quite the same emotional punch as our number one game. It was a modern masterpiece, throwback vibe with a fresh Bruins roster, an all-time Bruins roster, the winningest team in NHL history. Jake DeBrusk playing hurt. It's put him among Bruins greats, like in terms of lore. This was a win for the fans, the franchise, and the future. But before 2023 rewrote the script, 2010 wrote the original, and that brings us to number one. January 1st, 2010, Fenway Park, the Bruins with a 2-1 overtime win over the Philadelphia Flyers. The first hockey game ever played at Fenway Park, one of the most iconic baseball stadiums in the world, set the blueprint for everything the Winter Classic would become. Scoreless first, Flyers took a lead in the second on Danny Savret's first NHL goal. Mark Recchi tied the game on the power play in the third, 2:18 left in the game, lifted the crowd to another level, and in overtime, Marco Sturm tipped home the game winner off a pass from Patrice Bergeron, with Zdeno Chara earning the secondary assist. Marco Sturm also fought in the second period, dropping the gloves with Ian LaPerriere. Sean Thornton squared off with Dan Carcillo earlier in the game. First Winter Classic to feature fights, a nod to the big, bad Bruins heritage. Tim Thomas was rock solid in this one, especially in overtime. 2-on-1 save on Mike Richards and Jeff Carter that kept the Bruins alive just before the Sturm winner. Bobby Orr, Bobby Clark dropped the puck. Stage was pure Boston with fog rolling in, snow in the air, green monster looming in the background. Vintage brown jerseys for the Bruins in this one. Flyers went with cream throwbacks, instantly iconic looks. Bruins became the first home team to Winter Classic. This was the marquee event of the NHL that year, seeing as there was no All-Star game due to the Olympics. And now, Marco Sturm, overtime hero that day, dropping the gloves, is now head coach of the Boston Bruins. Talk about full circle, dropping the gloves, scoring the winner, to wearing suit behind the bench as head coach of the Boston Bruins. So why is this one number one? First game at Fenway, first home team Winter Classic win, OT finish, a fight, hero who's now the head coach. Historic Bruins moment. Everything clicked that day. The venue, the weather, the drama, the history, the legacy lives on through Marco Sturm, who 15 years later now leads this team into its next chapter. And we'll see what they're able to do in 2026 outdoors, taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that's a game that will be, of course, well talked about here on this podcast. Do not miss a thing by subscribing to Locked On NHL Bruins on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Don't forget to check out the Locked On NHL podcast next as well. League-wide stories from our local experts. No off-season here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please do take care of yourselves as well. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.